Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're specifically going to talk about Dragons of Stormwreck Isle. So, Dragons of Stormwreck Isle is a brand new. And we're going to talk about Hank the Ranger and Diane the Acrobat, who are characters from Gary Gygax's Dungeons and Dragons 1980s Storm Saturday morning cartoon. Okay, all right. So this Dragon of Stormwreck Isle is a new starter box, which is very exciting. We have a lot of starter boxes now. We have the Lost Mines of Phandelver, which is not a good starter box. It was around for like the first 5-6 years of 5th edition. It's pretty horrible. It's got like one set of dice. Lost Mines of Phandelver itself, the adventure, a lot of people love it and enjoy it. But overall, it had a really crappy box, and it was just cheap, and it didn't... Like, if you've ever seen the Pathfinder Beginner Box, that is the best beginner box ever published in any tabletop role-playing game. It still hasn't been defeated any... The Essentials kit is really good, but I have to give it to Pathfinder. The Pathfinder Beginner Box, Pathfinder 1 Beginner Box, was the best I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of starter boxes, right? But the Last Mines of Phandelver was pretty crap. And it wasn't good, right? Now, there was one saving grace for that thing. It has always been cheap. It's like $12, right? And I think sometimes you could even get it a little cheaper than that. And it's got a set of dice in it. Dice are like $10 now, right? So you were getting a lot for the... It wasn't a good box, but it was a good value. That's my take on Apple phones, right? They're better than Android phones, but they cost 3 or 4 times what Android phones cost. So they're better phones, but they're not a better value, right? So Lost Mines of Phandelver was a bad starter box, but not a bad value. And I know that's complicated. All right, Essentials kit, fantastic. It's a great starter box. I recommend it to anybody. I got super lucky. I bought 10 of them at Target for $8 a piece. Sometimes they have these super sales on them, and if that happens, you should just... And I literally gave them all away, and I have like one, I think, for myself, but I gave them away to spread the hobby, and I really felt great doing that. It was like really nice. But this Dragons of Stormwreck Isle is a new starter box, so people starting the game literally have 3 different options now. By the way, there's a fourth. There's even more starter boxes than that out. I forgot. There's the Stranger Things starters box, which is very nice. By the way, I own every single one of these. And then there's the Rick and Morty starter box, which is super weird, and it's a product that, frankly, I don't think it should even exist. Because the moment you're like, why did we get this? You gotta say, wasn't there like 15 things that would have been better, like to spend money on than this? Right, so, I think, or better to get the space, right? So I think that it was kind of weird that they did it that way. Okay, so this Dragons of Stormwreck Isle becomes a new product, right? And it's another way for people to start. But it's very special in that it has this really wonderfully special option, or this wonderfully special distinctor, where Hank the Ranger and Diane the Acrobat are coming in from Gary Gygax's beautiful, awesome, wonderful 1980s D&D Saturday morning cartoon, right? Now, the cool thing about this is it was a great cartoon. It was a great Saturday morning cartoon. Not a great D&D Saturday morning cartoon. It held its own among American Saturday morning cartoons. And by the way, American Saturday morning cartoons are a thing. It's a vibe, right? I was a teen when it was happening, right? So, but, basically, it was exciting. So I grew up I was a kid in the 70s, and you would just literally wake up on Saturday morning, and you would just plop yourself down at 8 a.m. in the morning, and until 1 p.m., there was just nothing but shows for you, and it was a delight, and it was a special time, and you ate Captain Crunch cereal, and it was just wonderful. And D&D was a really, now, and then that transitioned up to the 80s. They were still doing it then, and 80s was peak, because it had Transformers, it had D&D, it had, Strawberry Shortcake, it had, the Justice League, it had, just like Star Wars cartoons and Thundar the Barbarian and Thundercats, and like it was huge, right? And it was really special, and it was a moment in Americana. It was a moment, and the world looks over at America as like, y'all's got the best stuff, and we do, right? Like, because I'm not sure this was happening. This wasn't happening anywhere else. Like, I couldn't name a British cartoon show from the 80s if you paid me $1,000, right? Like, nor any other country, right? Like, so this is definitely an American thing. And Gary Gygax not only made this amazing advertisement for Dungeons and Dragons, he also made this amazing show just for American kids, and a ton of kids like that probably never played D&D or never cared about D&D just really enjoyed the show. It was full of adventure and full of action, and like it was a thing, man. And now Hank the Barbarian and Diane the Acrobat are going to be on the covers, and this is a huge deal for a whole lot of reasons. Okay, let's scale it down. Let's say that nothing happens except that they're on the cover and they are not statted. Okay, it's still a big deal, right? Because one, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is pointing straight back to Gary, right? Now, granted, I get it. D&D 5e 5th edition does not ever say Gary Gygax, and there definitely, in my humble opinion, was a memo, because you never hear Crawford, none of the people ever mention the name. Why is that? Well, I think that's a complicated subject. I think probably the biggest thing is, I think, there's a legacy issue, right? So I think they would love to embrace him, but the family is a hot mess. Gary Gygax, Gygax's son, got into a absolutely catastrophic whirlwind of bad PR last year. Luke Gygax really just kind of like appears to want to just get on with his life and does not want to dedicate himself to Dungeons and Dragons. So that's a thing. But it's a really cool, awesome thing that this is happening, because Hank the Ranger and Diane the Acrobat are really important. So one, Hank the Ranger is just like stones to the wall awesome. He's just really cool, right? So he's a cool ranger, but he's got an energy bow, right? And he was the leader of the group, right? And he was just generally cool, right? Great character, right? Diane the Acrobat is very important because it was Gary Gygax saying from the gate, this game is for everyone. It's not just for white people, right? And it told people right away, hey, when it comes to Dungeons & Dragons, all genders are welcome. When it comes to Dungeons & Dragons, all races are welcome. When it comes to Dungeons & Dragons, we see that there has been a problematic relationship between the United States of America and black people in general, right? And Gary was doing what he could to fix it, right? He made sure that there was diversity, right? There was Diane the Acrobat, and Sheila, the healer, was in there as well. So there was gender representation, there was race representation, and it was really amazing. And when you put Diane the Acrobat on the cover, that is a big statement saying, hey, we are, this is important, and we're doing our thing to make this happen, and it was really, really cool and special. And, so this is a point back to Gary, right, from Wizards of the Coast, in my humble opinion. I know other people might say, no, Scott, it's not, and I think, Wizards of the Coast relationship with the Gygax family is incredibly complicated. And so, so that is challenging to just understand, what was happening there, what were they trying to accomplish with all this. And, but I definitely, in my humble opinion, it is definitely a point back to Gary. And I also think it just really, brings out a really cool aspect of Dungeons and Dragons, and it's going to point. People are like, "Who are these?" It's already being covered. The second it was like on D&D Direct, people were like, "That's Hank the Ranger and that's Diane the Acrobat." Like, and they were already educating others about what was being shown, and it was really exciting. So now, if they are statted in the book, you have just established D&D Isekai. What is Isekai? Isekai is when a person from this world, or the IRL world, goes into a fantasy world. It's a huge theme in Japanese anime and manga right now, and a lot of people don't know this. Hank and Diana were not player characters in Dungeons and Dragons. Gary Gygax was like, what if people who were playing Dungeons & Dragons in the real world got sucked into the Dungeons & Dragons world and got trapped there and had to earn their right back to the IRL world? Which means the moment they introduce these characters into it's actually already happened, right? They're on the cover, right? So they have now permissioned isekai play. So Scott Garibay can put himself into a D&D world. That's canon now, right? Like, because those characters are not player characters in the D&D world. They are specifically real-world Earth people traveling to the Dungeons and Dragons world and then becoming adventurers. And then working their way back to Earth. That is something that has never, ever been in Dungeons and Dragons previously. And I have the adventure, the first edition adventure that put all the characters into, all the characters from the show into the area. But Hank and Diane and all those characters have never really been. They weren't statted in that. They are statted in the television show booklet, but it's not a rule book, right? So we keep getting closer and closer to actually getting these characters statted and making them canon, and that is a big, big deal, right? Because that could be an entire immediately dungeon masters are going to be permissioned to do that, right? It's a big deal because, like, if you just run your campaign, people are like, well, hey, this is a little off the grid. You're like, no, this is right on the cover, right? So it's really different, and I'm really excited for it. I'm really excited to see where all this is going. I think it's a huge deal that Hank the Ranger and Diane the Acrobat are on the cover, and also it leads to the end point that I want, which is I want the D&D Saturday morning cartoon delivered as a book, right? And a full book. And so and also I want rules for isekaiing real people into the D&D world, right? Canon from Wizards of the Coast. I would love to see this, and this is all steps toward that. All that's my opinion. What do you think? Are you excited as I am for Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, specifically because of Hank the Ranger and Diane the Acrobat being on the cover? Do you think they'll stat them in the book? Also, do you think they're going to piecemeal out these characters into other products? I think that's a good idea from a marketing perspective, because I think they're every single reveal is going to be a big deal. I have to say, Wild Beyond the Witchlight, I had no interest in that book. The moment I knew it had D&D Saturday morning cartoon characters in it, it quadrupled my interest in the book, tenfold, right? And it's one of my most beloved D&D books now. So each one of these characters is a rocket booster on the product they're on. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.